We're going to close the schools in those areas tomorrow.
In addition to closing all schools, including Catholic academies in the hotspot neighborhoods, the governor has a warning about religious worship. The latest on President Trump's condition as he's treated for coronavirus, and another high-profile White House staffer tests positive. Paying tribute to the men and women of the NYPD who we've lost to coronavirus. Plus, the Holy Father sharing his ideas on how we should face the world after the pandemic. The news starts right now.
Better safe than sorry. I would not send my child to a school in a hotspot cluster that has not been tested.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo responding to the 3% spike in 9 neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Queens. Schools from public to private to Catholic in those neighborhoods closing tomorrow. And the governor has a warning about religious gatherings as well. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. In addition to shutting down schools in those 9 zip codes, the governor also put houses of worship on notice, threatening to close them if coronavirus protocols are not enforced. Currents News' Emily Druby is standing by with the very latest. Emily.
Christine, Catholic schools throughout the Diocese of Brooklyn worked hard all summer to put safety protocols into place. And now 4 primary schools and 1 high school will have to stop in-person learning. Now, academies and parish schools in the diocese are urging the governor to immediately reverse his decision. They say they've been operating safely for weeks and can continue to do so.
I am not going to recommend or allow any New York City family to send their child to a school that I wouldn't send my child. We're going to close the schools in those areas.
Public and private schools in 9 zip codes seeing a spike in COVID-19 will close starting Tuesday, a decision made by both state and city officials. An additional 12 zip codes are being watched closely and are on the brink of the same fate. 5 Catholic schools will have to move to all remote learning. 1 high school, St. Edmund's Prep, and 4 primary schools, Our Lady of Grace in Gravesend, St. Edmund and Sheepshead Bay, Good Shepherd in Marine Park, which was already doing a hybrid model of learning, and St. Athanasius in Bensonhurst. Parents of St. Athanasius students devastated.
It's very sad because the kids, they were excited to come back to school, and now they going back again, probably remote, it's going to be a little tough for them.
Everything's going well here, and it's a little bit like it's not fair for other persons that don't follow the rules. Everybody needs to stop again. So this is really, really sad.
While staff calling the situation frustrating.
There's no reason why we can't stay open. We don't have anybody so far since we opened testing positive or family members testing positive. So we're really doing the right thing.
Before the governor's decision was handed down, New York State Catholic Conference also begged officials to keep schools open, writing, "Should our schools be ordered closed by the state absent any significant COVID-19 outbreaks because of inferior protocols at non-Catholic schools, it would be a profound injustice to our families who have placed their trust in us to keep their children safe and whose faith has been richly rewarded to date." But the governor closing them anyway. Monsignor David CASSATO, the diocese vicar for Catholic schools and also the pastor of St. Athanasius, calling for people to speak out in support of keeping schools open.
And we need to keep our schools open. Get that message out. Call the governor's office, call the mayor's office, and keep our schools open. They're safe, they're clean, they're sanitized. Every single day, it's been wonderful to see those kids in school together.
The 4 Diocese of Brooklyn Catholic academies and parish schools affected by the closure have over 1,000 students enrolled in them. They've only had 1 positive COVID case in the month they've been open, saying that shows their safety policies are working. Churches are also at risk. The governor putting religious institutions on notice today, saying if they don't enforce social distancing rules, he will shut them down too. In Windsor Terrace, Brooklyn, Emily Druby, Currents News. Back to you, Christine.
All right, thanks, Emily. Educators are outraged that a proposed stimulus bill is excluding Catholic schools. The HEROES Act includes $225 billion for education, but includes language that prohibits any of those funds for non-public schools. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has decried that move, saying it is unconscionable. President Donald Trump is apparently on the mend. He says he'll continue his COVID recovery at home in the White House after spending the weekend in the hospital. The president tweeted, "Don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life." He didn't even let it dominate his hospital stay, and that caused some controversy.
The fact of the matter is that he's doing really well.
President Donald Trump's doctor giving an optimistic prognosis on Sunday. The president himself releasing a video recorded in the hospital.
I learned a lot about COVID. I learned it by really going to school. This is the real school. This isn't the let's read the book school. And I get it, and I understand it.
But there are questions about how seriously the White House is taking the president's COVID-19 diagnosis, especially after this motorcade outside of the hospital.
Amazingly irresponsible. His physician should have said no.
President Trump being driven past supporters outside Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, seen through his SUV window wearing a face mask and waving.
And he wanted to, as a sign of gratitude, show folks that he's still fighting for them.
You could see a member of Trump's Secret Service detail in personal protective gear. The drive-by prompting an outcry from medical experts who question Trump's judgment and his doctors. An attending physician at Walter Reed Hospital who is not treating the president had this response.
I have a hard time believing that without undue influence based on their chain of command, that those physicians would have cleared that. Masks or no masks, being inside a vehicle that is hermetically sealed circulates virus inside and potentially puts people at risk.
But the White House says it was cleared by Trump's medical team, a team that also revealed on Sunday that the president's blood oxygen levels dropped on both Friday and Saturday, and that he received supplemental oxygen at the White House on Friday. President Trump is being treated with an aggressive cocktail of medications, including the antiviral drug remdesivir, the steroid dexamethasone, and an experimental antibody treatment. The nation's top doc, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says the president is in good hands.
Personally, I have not been involved in the direct care of the president. But I might comment that my colleagues that I know, including Sean Conley, are very good physicians, and they're very qualified. So I am really confident that the President of the United States is getting the optimal care that you can get with the team over at Walter Reed.
As for the presidential campaign, Vice President Mike Pence, who has tested negative for COVID, is back out on the campaign trail with a rally in Utah. The U.S. bishops are praying for the recovery of the president and his family, releasing this statement on Sunday, saying, "May God grant them full healing and may he keep their family safe and healthy. Let us keep praying for all who are suffering because of the novel coronavirus, especially the sick and dying and their families, and all those who have lost loved ones." First Lady Melania Trump says she's quarantining in the White House. Mrs. Trump tweeting on Monday that she's feeling good and resting at home. An official says Melania realizes the dangers of COVID and does not want to risk exposing others. The First Lady also thanked everyone who has prayed for her family's health. A top Trump advisor, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany, has also tested positive. McEnany tweeting that she was diagnosed with the disease today, despite showing no symptoms. McEnany says she will begin quarantining immediately and will continue her work as the White House press secretary remotely. And still ahead in this newscast, we dive deeper into our coverage of the president's health and take a look at the commander-in-chief's COVID treatment, the drug remdesivir, what it does and who it works best for. That's still ahead. Pope Francis is sharing his ideas on how to face the world after this pandemic. On Sunday in Assisi, the Holy Father signed his new encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, which means all brothers. Currents News' Jessica Easthope reports.
Pope Francis has signed his third encyclical. This weekend, the Holy Father paid tribute to his namesake, St. Francis of Assisi, releasing the letter on his feast day, October 4th. The letter, titled Fratelli Tutti, means all brothers, words frequently used by the saint when addressing his followers.
Tutti siamo fratelli. San Francesco di Assisi diceva tutti fratelli.
The theme of the encyclical is fraternity and social friendship. Pope Francis wrote about the pandemic and how the world will come out stronger only if we stay connected. The trip marked the first time the Holy Father has left Rome since the pandemic. He said it has proven that no one can face life in isolation.
Oggi ci uniamo nella preghiera e nella penitenza per chiedere la grazia della guarigione di questa pandemia.
The encyclical has striking meaning for Catholics in the United States, who, in addition to the pandemic, are living in polarizing racial and political times. Pope Francis says human fraternity is the only way to achieve peace.
I segni dei tempi mostrano chiaramente che la fraternità umana e la cura del creato formano l'unica via verso lo sviluppo integrale e la pace.
The Holy Father's message to Catholics is to always follow the example of the Good Samaritan and recognize the dignity of everyone.
Essere capaci di avere compassione, questa è la chiave, questa è la nostra chiave. Se tu davanti a una persona bisognosa non senti compassione, se il tuo cuore non si commuove, vuol dire che qualcosa che non va.
Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Pope Francis's third encyclical is some 300 pages long. In it, some important lessons and ideas to build a better world. The editor at Crux, John Allen, joins us now to break it all down for us. And John, Fratelli Tutti is very long. Many won't read it. The title literally means all brothers. So what is the meaning of the encyclical? What's the gist?
Well, Christine, I have with me the printed Italian version of the encyclical. You can see this is a pretty thick tome.
Wow.
287 sections in all. And so any attempt to boil this down to like a single idea or a single soundbite is obviously going to be ridiculous. But in broad strokes, if we can focus on the forest rather than the trees, I think this is the Pope trying to give us an X-ray of the situation, the global situation, as he sees it in the early 21st century. And frankly, it's fairly bleak. He sees a conflict between two currents at loose in the world, both of which he thinks are fatally flawed. Neoliberal individualism on the one hand, which translates into things like free market economics, laissez-faire capitalism, also radical secularism, and on the other hand, angry nationalist populism, including the political forms of national populism that we see around the world today. And he sees a great global conflict between these two forces emerging. And this is his, if you like, this is the Pope's Hail Mary pass. It is his last-ditch attempt to offer an alternative, a third way, if you like. And that third way is human fraternity. But I will tell you this, I think it is one of the most dramatic messages we have heard from popes in quite some time, and one of the most fascinating.
All right, you say people in the U.S. might read into certain things that the Pope wrote, like when he talked about an exchange of charges and countercharges, debate degenerates into a permanent state of disagreement and confrontation. Sounds like he's talking about the U.S. presidential debate. And he also criticized...
Yeah, it's really hard not to hear Trump-Biden in that,
right? And he also criticized today's social media culture and social aggression, which some might think is a reference to President Trump. Is he referring to these U.S. things, or are we reading into it too much?
Well, look, you know, we're Catholics, so the proper answer to almost every question is both and, right? So here's the deal. Pope Francis began writing this encyclical more than a year ago, even before the coronavirus erupted. You know, well, I mean, we knew there would be an election in the United States, but it hadn't really taken shape yet. Further, popes always have a global vision. They're never talking just to one place or one people. So it would be a kind of an act of arrogance, frankly, on the part of Americans to think, oh, he must be talking about us.
Right. Now, this was also the first trip outside of Rome for the Pope. It was very different. Only about 24 people in the chapel for Mass. They were socially distanced, wearing masks. Talk about how different this visit was because of the pandemic. And do you think Francis will travel more now?
You know, my wife and I were in Assisi on Saturday when Pope Francis was there. 400 feet away from the Basilica of St. Francis, you would have had no idea the Pope was in town. There were no crowds, there were no banners, there was no boisterousness, all of those things we associate with papal travel. Of course, Pope Francis wanted to keep this a strictly private trip, and I think in some ways this may set the tone in the short run for the kinds of papal trips we see in the future. We may not see any big crowds. We may not see any big public liturgies. We may not see any huge photo ops, you know, with flags waving and bands playing, you know, the kinds of things we associate with papal travel. We may see something quieter, more behind the scenes, more targeted, and more limited.
All right, it's affecting everything, even the Pope. All right, John Allen, the editor at Crux, thanks for being with us.
You bet, Christine.
There's a lot more news headed your way. A solemn service at St. Patrick's Cathedral to remember the men and women of the NYPD who have died from COVID-19. President Trump is being treated with remdesivir, what it is and how the drug can help fight coronavirus. And the annual blessing of the animals on the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. New York's finest are praying for their fellow officers who were lost due to the COVID pandemic. The memorial mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral remembering 46 brave men and women who returned to the Lord. The service had limited seating due to the pandemic. In attendance was Mayor Bill de Blasio and Commissioner Dermot Shea. New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan and Brooklyn Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio talk about how the force has stuck together through these tough times.
They often say the NYPD is a family, and sometimes that seems like a cliche, but when you see something like this, you know that it's not. They are a family.
Obviously, the families were buoyed up. They were given some comfort, some consolation, so that's what our remembrance is about. We don't forget. We don't forget our loved ones. We don't forget those who served the city. We want to honor them, and we have done that today.
Cardinal Dolan and Bishop DiMarzio also blessed medallions that were handed out to those families. Part of President Trump's treatment for COVID-19 is the drug remdesivir. Right now, it's available only under emergency use, and it's showing promise in many patients. Tim Callery has more on how remdesivir works.
Back in March, Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center joined 97 other institutions around the world to conduct clinical trials on remdesivir.
We feel really lucky at Dartmouth-Hitchcock that we were able to get the remdesivir trials here very early so that we could provide this treatment to our patients.
The hospital started offering the drug to a majority of its COVID-19 patients.
Remdesivir is administered intravenously with a single loading dose of 200 milligrams and then once daily 100 milligrams after that.
The trials have ended and the final analysis is happening right now. But Dr. Richard Zuckerman says it was important to get the data out early so that the medication could be used broadly because it showed some success.
What remdesivir showed was an improved time to recovery, a trend toward lower mortality in the severe trial. And in the moderate trial, they also showed an improvement in time to recovery in patients receiving 5 days of remdesivir.
President Trump is currently taking remdesivir as he fights his own battle with COVID-19. Other patients can take it as well if they meet a certain criteria.
If they fit the emergency use access criteria, meaning they have lower risk for complications with the medication. And in fact, the vast majority of patients that are admitted to the hospital now do fit criteria under the emergency use access.
Again, that was Tim Callery reporting. President Trump's treatment with remdesivir began immediately after he tested positive for the virus last week. Senate Democrats are continuing their calls for the postponement of President Trump's Supreme Court nomination, Judge Amy Coney Barrett, this time citing health concerns. The Democrats say the president's own COVID infection, as well as the recent spread among some Republicans, drives home the urgency of their safety concerns. Majority Leader Senator Mitch McConnell has said the Senate won't meet this week, but will still work to confirm Barrett before November 3rd. On the heels of the battle over the 9th Justice, today marks a new term for the Supreme Court of the United States. Cases are being heard virtually due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Chief Justice John Roberts honored the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg before beginning court business.
Justice Ginsburg's contributions as advocate, jurist, and citizen are immeasurable. We at the court will remember her as a dear friend and a treasured colleague.
Two cases of big concern for Catholics will come up to the High Court. The first one, being heard this term, will decide whether the taxpayer-funded Catholic Social Services in Philadelphia can legally refuse to license same-sex couples as foster parents. Also, the American Medical Association has filed a petition to ask the High Court to strike down a rule from the Trump administration barring clinics funded by taxpayers from referring women for abortions. Still to come on Currents News, an extraordinary experience for young people with Down syndrome and the motorcycle group that brought them to meet Pope Francis, and celebrating the Feast of St. Francis with the annual blessing of animals. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Their job is to protect the Pope, and today was their first official day. The new Swiss Guard recruits were officially sworn in today. Last week, they met with Pope Francis face-to-face. That meeting was supposed to happen in May, but the ceremony was postponed because of the pandemic. The Holy Father asked the soldiers to always preserve their principles and thanked them for their service. Bravo. Pope Francis also got a visit from a group of motorcyclists who call themselves Route 21. They travel throughout Italy with young people who have Down syndrome in the back seat. While in Rome, they participated in the Pope's general audience and gave the Holy Father a ring with the Route 21 logo. The group's goal is to raise awareness wherever they go. A popular Vatican statue has made its way to the U.S. Capitol.
3, 2, 1.
The statue, called Angels Unawares, unveiled on the Catholic University campus during a small ceremony. The original version was released by Pope Francis in St. Peter's Square last year. It depicts a group of 140 migrants and refugees with angel wings emerging from the center of the statue. And finally tonight, we look to the Diocese of Brooklyn's celebrations of the Feast of St. Francis of Assisi and the furry friends that joined them. Dogs, cats, and every household animal in between was blessed by priests from around Brooklyn and Queens. St. Francis, also known as the patron saint of animals, brought the celebration of blessing pets around 800 years ago, introducing the idea that all of God's creations are blessed in God's eyes. During the celebration this past Sunday, priests asked God to bestow the animals with good health and to keep them safe from all harm. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. I hope to see you again next time.